The first episode of South Park has a black CIA helicopter in it. Not in the background, not hidden, right there, in plain sight, tracking alien activity over a small Colorado town, while every adult in the frame pretends nothing unusual is happening. That was 1997. The show has been doing this ever since, and almost nobody talks about it. South Park has spent 27 years building one of the most complete and most serious arguments about hidden power ever put inside a cartoon. Not through one famous episode, through 10 specific stories across 10 specific moments that connect into a single position about what secret organizations actually are, how they actually work, and why the Illuminati version of events is both wrong and exactly what the people running things want everyone to believe. This essay covers all 10. Every claim verified, every episode real, every consequence documented. Welcome back to East Park. Subscribe if this is your first time here. Now let's get into it. The show that started with aliens and black helicopters. The first episode of South Park aired on August 13th, 1997. Most people remember it as the one where Cartman gets probed by aliens. What most people forget is that the exact same episode also had black CIA helicopters tracking the alien activity, government agents monitoring the town from a distance, and a systematic effort by every adult in South Park to either ignore what was happening or pretend it was not happening at all. The alien visitors were a real presence. The cover-up was immediate, and the children were the only ones paying attention. That was episode 1. South Park has been doing this from the very beginning, and the fact that it does not get talked about nearly enough is one of the stranger blind spots in how people remember this show. When most people think about South Park and conspiracy, they think of specific episodes. One famous parody here, one savage takedown there. What they tend to miss is that the conspiracy layer is not a theme South Park returns to occasionally. It is baked into the architecture of the show itself. The alien visitor hidden somewhere in every single episode is not a coincidence. The black CIA helicopters that appear in the pilot are not just a throwaway gag. Parker and Stone built a world where hidden forces are operating at all times, where the government is almost always watching, and where the adults consistently choose not to see what is directly in front of them. To understand what South Park has been doing with secret societies and hidden power across its entire run, you have to understand what kind of show it actually is, not what it presents itself as. Not the surface layer of crude jokes and cartoon violence, the actual show underneath. South Park launched in the summer of 1997. The cultural moment it walked into was one of the most paranoid in recent American history, and that paranoia had a very specific flavor. The X-Files was one of the biggest shows on television. Area 51 was a genuine fixation in mainstream culture. Y2K was 2 years away and already generating serious anxiety about systems and institutions that most people had trusted without ever examining. The Cold War had technically ended 6 years earlier, but the institutions built to fight it had not gone anywhere, and a generation of Americans was just beginning to notice that the machinery of surveillance, secrecy, and control had outlasted the threat it was supposedly built to address. Parker and Stone were in their late 20s when they made South Park. They grew up in this atmosphere. They watched the X-Files. They saw the same headlines, and they made a show that treated the premise of hidden power not as something to be mocked wholesale, but as something to be examined honestly, and then filtered through the specific lens of 4 foul-mouthed kids from a small Colorado town. What makes South Park unusual, and what this essay is going to trace across 10 specific episodes, is that the show does not have a single relationship to the idea of secret power. It has several, and they change depending on what the show is actually looking at. Sometimes the hidden forces in a South Park episode are real and dangerous, and the comedy comes from how casually devastating they are. Sometimes they are fake, manufactured to distract from something even more uncomfortable. Sometimes they are real but completely mundane, and the horror is that something this ordinary has been running the world the whole time. And sometimes the most frightening reveal in an episode is not that a secret society exists, but that its existence has changed absolutely nothing about how people live. That range of positions is not inconsistency. Parker and Stone are not confused about what they believe. The range is the point. They have spent 27 seasons arguing that the Illuminati model of power, where a single group of shadowy elites controls everything from a secret room, is both wrong and dangerous. Wrong because power is messier and more distributed than that. Dangerous because the myth of a single controlling force lets everyone else off the hook. This is worth sitting with for a moment. The Illuminati idea in all its forms, from the original 18th century secret society that conspiracy theorists have been misinterpreting for centuries, to the modern version that lives in YouTube thumbnails and late-night Reddit threads, depends on a very specific premise. That premise is that someone is in charge, that there is a group, a council, a bloodline, a cabal that sits above the chaos and directs it, that the disorder and cruelty of the world world are not random but orchestrated. The reason this idea is so appealing is not because it is accurate. It is appealing because it is comforting. If someone is in charge of the disaster, then the disaster can theoretically be stopped. If there is a group running everything, then there is a group that could, in theory, be identified and removed. The alternative, that the chaos is genuinely structural and distributed and that no single group is steering it, is a much harder idea to sit with. South Park takes that harder idea seriously. Over and over again, across its best episodes on this subject, the show keeps arriving at the same uncomfortable place. Power does not work the way the Illuminati story says it works. Hidden influence is real. Cover-ups are real. Secret organizations with inner doctrines and outer faces are real, but they do not control everything. They did not design the system, and removing them would not fix what the system produces. The show demonstrates this argument through specific, verifiable episodes, not through abstractions. Through 22-minute cartoons about a Scientology probe test and a government surveillance program run by Santa Claus, and a 9/11 conspiracy that turns out to have been created by the government specifically to make the government look more powerful than it is. That last one is worth pausing on, because it captures something the rest of this essay is going to keep circling back to. The episode in question aired in 2006. It ended with George W. Bush explaining to two 10-year-olds that the government runs 9/11 truth organizations not because they orchestrated the attacks, but because roughly a quarter of the American population finds it easier to believe in government omnipotence than in the straightforward explanation. The conspiracy theory about a hidden, all-powerful government is itself a product of a hidden government operation, designed to make the government look hidden and all-powerful. Parker and Stone wrote an episode in which the Illuminati myth is being manufactured by the very entity the Illuminati myth is supposed to be exposing. That is a complicated idea. It is also a completely clear one, and it got delivered in a 22-minute cartoon alongside a subplot about a child defecating in a school urinal. This is how South Park works. The clarity and the absurdity arrive together. The serious argument and the ridiculous container it comes in are not in tension with each other. The absurdity is the delivery mechanism. It is how the show gets past your defenses and puts the serious argument directly in your lap before you have had time to decide whether to engage with it. Over its run, South Park has produced a small number of episodes that deal directly with secret societies, hidden power, and the machinery of conspiracy, not dozens. A specific, countable set of episodes where the show commits fully to engaging with the idea of organized hidden influence and says something clear about it. Those episodes, taken together, form an argument, not a random collection of satire, an actual position stated through specific story choices and specific character decisions about what secret power actually is, how it actually works, who actually benefits from it, and what the rest of us do when we find out about it. The position, stated plainly, is this: hidden organizations are real. They rely on the willingness of ordinary people to keep their secrets. They protect themselves through litigation, through social pressure, through controlling what their members know and when they know it. They do not control the world. They control their piece of it. And the people inside them are usually not cackling villains. They are usually people who found something that answered a need and who became willing to defend that answer at any cost. That is a human story, not a supernatural one. And South Park, for all its aliens and demons and ancient gods summoned through basement rituals, keeps arriving back at the human story every time. The episodes ahead span more than 20 years of the show. They range from a season 9 episode that nearly brought down a production company to a 3-part season 11 trilogy that won an Emmy. They include a direct confrontation with the NSA, a secret society that believes the world has literally turned to garbage, a cult that accidentally gave one of the main characters his most defining trait, and a Pinewood Derby race that ended with the entire planet being sealed inside a force field as punishment for collective dishonesty. Each of these episodes makes a specific argument. Each one adds a piece to a larger picture, and the larger picture is South Park's real answer to the Illuminati question. The show is not arguing that secret societies do not exist. Several of them, as the following episodes will demonstrate, very clearly do. The show is not arguing that hidden power is harmless. The episodes ahead include genuine casualties, real-world consequences, and at least one character whose entire existence was shaped by his parents stumbling into a cult meeting for free beer. What the show is arguing is something more specific. Power hides. Power organizes. Power recruits. And the most reliable protection that hidden power has ever had is not the loyalty of its members, not the complexity of its rituals, and not the resources of its legal teams. The most reliable protection hidden power has ever had is the preference most people have for a simple story over a complicated truth. South Park keeps telling the complicated complicated truth, sometimes dressed as a cartoon raccoon riding a sea monster, sometimes dressed as a 4th grade field trip to a government portal to the human imagination. Always, underneath the costume, the same thing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section is where the real world got involved. A specific episode, a specific organization, and a sequence of events that proved every single thing the episode was saying about secret societies in exactly the way the episode predicted it would. Section 2, The Church That Sued a Cartoon. Trapped in the Closet, Season 9, Episode 12. South Park has made a lot of enemies over its run. Politicians, celebrities, religious groups, entire countries. Most of them complained loudly for a few days and then moved on. One of them launched a full investigation, tried to plant a mole inside the production studio, pressured a major Hollywood studio to pull a film, and may have used a dying man's name to quit a job he had held for 9 years without his knowledge or consent. That organization was the Church of Scientology. The episode was Trapped in the Closet. It aired on November 16th, 2005, and everything that happened after it aired is the most complete real-world proof the show has ever accidentally generated for one of its own arguments. To understand the episode, you have to understand what it was doing that was different from most religious satire. South Park had mocked religion before. It had gone after Mormons, Catholics, Jewish traditions, and Islam, always with the same basic tool. Take the belief system at face value, describe it plainly, and let the absurdity speak for itself. Trapped in the Closet did the same thing. What made it different was what it was describing. Stan is walking home one afternoon and runs into a group of Scientologists offering a free personality test on the street. He takes the test. The results come back, and the Scientologist running the session tells Stan he is deeply depressed and that Scientology can help. Stan is a 10-year-old boy. He goes home and asks his parents for money to continue with the program, telling them he has been feeling sad and did not know it until now. His parents give him the money. This is the outer layer. The face the organization shows to new people. Free test. Sympathetic listener. The suggestion that the person being tested has a problem they did not know they had, and that the organization has the solution. Stan is not recruited through force or manipulation of the obvious kind. He is recruited through a process that feels helpful, until the point where it no longer does. After the test, Stan is taken further in. The Scientology president reviews his results and tells him his reading is the highest ever recorded. Higher, in fact, than any reading in the history of the organization. The conclusion the president draws is that Stan must be the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard, the man who founded Scientology. Stan is brought to a room and told the inner doctrine, the beliefs the organization does not advertise on the street, the story of Xenu. The show displayed this doctrine on screen with a banner at the bottom that read, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." The Comedy Central episode page stated explicitly that nothing in this segment was exaggerated. The content came from a consultant named Mark Ebner, an investigative journalist who had spent years reporting on Scientology and co-authored a book about Hollywood's relationship with the organization. He confirmed the accuracy of what was being shown. The Xenu story, the tiered structure of belief, the practice of charging members to advance through levels, the use of personality tests as recruitment tools, all of it was real. The Tom Cruise subplot runs alongside this. Cruise comes to South Park after hearing that the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard has appeared. He meets Stan. Stan, asked what he thinks of Cruise as an actor, tells him he is okay, but not as good as the guy from Napoleon Dynamite. Cruise goes into Stan's bedroom closet and refuses to come out. John Travolta is called in. He also goes in the closet. R. Kelly is called in. He also goes in. The joke about the closet operates on multiple levels at once, and the show was aware of exactly what it was doing. Stan eventually tells the assembled Scientologists that their religion is a scam designed to take money from people. The organization threatens to sue him. The credits roll. Every single name in the credits, from the animators to the voice actors to the showrunners, is listed as either John Smith or Jane Smith. That was not an accident. That was Parker and Stone anticipating exactly what was about to happen. Within months of the episode airing, the Church of Scientology's Office of Special Affairs opened a formal investigation. The goal was to find information that could be used against Parker, Stone, and anyone connected to the production. The investigation included surveillance of people associated with the show. It included a plan to get a young filmmaker employed at the studio as a mole. It included efforts to locate and identify the sources who had provided information for the episode. All of this was later reported and confirmed. The organization denied it while also not directly refuting the documentation that had emerged. The credits gag with John and Jane Smith had been a preemptive joke about the lawsuit threat. The investigation that followed was the joke becoming real. Every name was hidden because the people making the episode knew the organization had a documented history of targeting critics legally and personally. They were right. The Tom Cruise element created a second pressure point. At the time, Cruise was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He was also the most prominent public face of Scientology. His next film, Mission Impossible 3, was being distributed by Paramount Pictures. Paramount was owned by Viacom. Viacom also owned Comedy Central, which aired South Park. According to multiple reports at the time, Cruise made it clear that he would not participate in promotional activities for Mission Impossible 3 if Comedy Central rebroadcast Trapped in the Closet. The planned rebroadcast was pulled. Comedy Central said this was to honor Isaac Hayes, who had recently announced he was leaving the show. Both Cruise and Comedy Central denied the other version of events. The episode was not rebroadcast for a period. The Isaac Hayes situation is the part of this story that has the most weight. Hayes had played Chef on South Park since the beginning. He was one of the most beloved recurring characters on the show, and Hayes himself was a deeply respected musician with a career stretching back decades. He was also a Scientologist. In March 2006, a statement was released in Hayes' name saying he was leaving South Park because of the show's treatment of religion. The statement said there was a place for satire, but that South Park had crossed a line into intolerance and bigotry toward religious beliefs. The implication was that Trapped in the Closet had been the final straw. The problem with this account is that Hayes had suffered a stroke in January 2006. His son, Isaac Hayes III, later stated publicly that at the time the statement was released, his father was in no condition to make decisions of that kind on his own. He was not recovered. He had not written or approved the statement. Hayes III said a representative from within the Scientology organization had issued it on his behalf without his father's knowledge or consent. Hayes died in August 2008. He never publicly confirmed or denied the statement. His son's account is the most detailed and most direct statement from someone with direct knowledge of his condition at the time. The show's response to Hayes' departure was the season 10 premiere, The Return of Chef. The episode brought Chef back from an extended leave by having him return completely transformed after spending time with a group called the Super Adventure Club. Chef behaves strangely, says things that feel scripted, defends the group regardless of what anyone says about it. The boys try to get through to him. They cannot. Chef dies at the end of the episode in a way that is graphic even by South Park standards. The closing scene has the boys standing at a memorial, saying that they do not blame Chef, but they do blame the club that brainwashed him. Parker and Stone did not name Scientology in that episode. They did not need to. Every element of the Super Adventure Club, from its recruitment practices to its inner doctrine, to the way it had transformed a person who used to be warm and present into someone who repeated talking points and defended the organization above all else, was a direct structural mirror of what Trapped in the Closet had shown. The show was not being subtle. It was being precise. The real-world sequence of events around Trapped in the Closet forms a specific pattern. The episode described how a secret organization with a public face and a hidden inner doctrine recruits through perceived helpfulness, advances members through paid tiers of revelation, and responds to public criticism with legal pressure, personal investigation, and coordinated efforts to silence or discredit the source. Within months of the episode airing, the organization had launched an investigation into the show's creators, attempted to infiltrate the studio, applied pressure through a major star's business relationships to get the episode pulled from broadcast, and potentially issued a public resignation in the name of a man who was too ill to speak for himself. The episode made a prediction. The organization fulfilled it. This is what makes Trapped in the Closet more than a good South Park episode. Most episodes pick a target, satirize it, and move on. This one picked a target, described its methods in detail, and then the target demonstrated those methods in direct response to being described. The episode argued that this kind of organization protects itself through pressure and legal threat rather than through public argument. Nobody from the organization went on television to explain why the Xenu story was being misrepresented. Nobody wrote a detailed rebuttal. The response was investigation, pressure, and a pulled rebroadcast. The show was also making a specific point about how secret inner doctrines function. The Xenu story is not something Scientology advertises. New members do not hear it. It is revealed only after someone has spent enough time and money inside the organization to be deeply invested in staying. By the time the full picture is visible, the cost of leaving has become very high. The structure is designed so that the people most likely to leave are the ones who know the least, and the people who know the most have the most to lose by going. Stan's arc in the episode maps this precisely. He comes in through a free personality test. He is told he has a problem. He spends money on a solution. He is elevated to a special status. He is given access to the inner doctrine. And then the moment he suggests the organization should stop charging people for help, the warmth vanishes instantly and is replaced by a threat of legal action. The episode also does something with Tom Cruise that goes beyond the closet joke. By the time the episode aired, Cruise had been the public face of Scientology for years. His affiliation with the organization was one of the most publicly known celebrity-religion relationships in the world. Placing him in a closet and refusing to let him come out was not just a joke about his personal life, it was a structural argument about what public celebrity does for a secret organization. Famous members provide a face that the inner doctrine does not have. They draw people in through visibility and perceived success. They are not responsible for the doctrine. They may not even fully know the doctrine, but they serve as the most effective advertisement the organization has, and the organization protects them accordingly. When Cruise was positioned as having the power to pull an episode of a television show through business relationships that had nothing to do with the episode itself, he became an example of exactly this dynamic. The celebrity member, the organizational pressure, the business relationship as a tool. It all ran according to the same logic the episode had described. There is a detail in the episode that does not get discussed much. At the point where the Scientology president tells Stan the inner doctrine, Stan suggests that the organization should stop charging people for access to its teachings. The president's response is not to explain why the money is necessary or to defend the practice. He tells Stan that if the organization stopped charging, there would be no point to the whole thing. The money is not a side effect of the organization. The money is the purpose. The show does not exaggerate this to make a point. It states it plainly, through a character, as a direct admission from the organization's own leadership within the episode's logic. And given that the actual organization did not publicly dispute the portrayal in any substantive way, only attempted to suppress it, the argument stands. What Trapped in the Closet ultimately demonstrates is something that the rest of the episodes in this essay will keep building on. A secret organization does not need to be ancient, does not need robes and candlelight, does not need a centuries-old bloodline or a Masonic handshake. What it needs is a convincing outer face, a hidden inner truth, a method for keeping members financially and emotionally invested in not leaving, and a legal and social apparatus for dealing with anyone who tries to tell people what is actually inside. That is what the episode described. That is what followed the episode. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next question is what happens when the secret organization is not a church, when it has no public face at all, when the outer layer is not a personality test, but a ritual conducted in a basement with borrowed beer, and when the person most affected by what that ritual unleashed has been dying and waking up again for his entire life without knowing why. Section 3. The Cult That Changed Everything. Mysterion Rises. Season 14, Episode 12. Kenny McCormick dies in almost every episode of South Park. He gets crushed, shot, set on fire, hit by cars, eaten, and worse. And then he comes back. He is always there the next episode, in his orange parka, as if nothing happened. For the first several seasons, this was a running joke. A dark one, genuinely funny in its commitment, but a joke. Nobody in the show acknowledged it. Nobody in the town of South Park seemed to notice or remember. Kenny died, and Kenny came back, and that was the end of it. By season 14, the show did something with that joke that changed what it had meant the whole time. The Coon and Friends trilogy is 3 episodes. The first, Coon 2, Hindsight, aired on October 27th, 2010. The second, Mysterion Rises, aired on November 3rd, 2010. The third, Coon vs. Coon and Friends, aired on November 10th, 2010. For the purpose of what matters most in this section, the second episode is the one that carries the weight. Mysterion Rises is where the show finally answered the question it had been leaving open since 1997, and the answer it gave was not a punchline. It was an origin story connected to a real occult framework, described with enough specificity that it could only have been a deliberate choice. The setup across the trilogy is built around a superhero premise. The boys have alter egos. Cartman is the Coon. Kyle is Human Kite. Stan is Toolshed. Token is Tupperware. Kenny is Mysterion, a dark-cloaked figure who operates as a genuine hero in the way Cartman only pretends to be. When Cartman is expelled from the Coon and Friends team for selfish behavior, he goes looking for a new partner with more power than any of his former teammates. He finds one. At the end of Coon 2, Hindsight, an ancient entity called Cthulhu emerges from the Gulf of Mexico through a hole drilled by an oil company that punched through into another dimension. In Mysterion Rises, Kenny begins investigating his own past. He already knows he cannot stay dead. He wakes up after every death with no memory of dying, in fresh clothes, and nobody around him remembers what happened. He describes this experience in the episode not as a superpower, but as as a burden. He has watched himself die. He has felt it. He comes back and nobody acknowledges it, and he has to carry the memory alone. What he does not know is why. The investigation takes him to the Cult of Cthulhu, a secret organization operating in South Park. The cult holds regular meetings in a basement. The members chant prayers in a language drawn directly from H.P. Lovecraft's published fiction. The specific prayer used in the episode translates to, "In his house at Rillier, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming." This is verbatim Lovecraftian liturgy, used accurately and in context. The cult also recites a second chant during the episode. "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die." This is also a real Lovecraftian text. The show is not making up a fictional cult with fictional trappings. It is using a specific occult literary tradition and building its mythology around it accurately. The cult's basement is decorated with specific imagery: an inverted pentagram, the Eye of Horus, winged demon figures on shelves along the back wall, a plaque resembling a coat of arms with two crossed swords over a skull. The South Park Archives episode breakdown documents each of these details. The imagery is not random. The inverted pentagram is a specific symbol associated with occult practice. The Eye of Horus is one of the most widely recognized symbols associated with discussions of the Illuminati and hidden knowledge. The skull and crossbones imagery echoes the iconography of Skull and Bones, the secret society founded at Yale University in 1832. The show is placing its fictional cult inside a visual language that connects directly to real discussions of hidden power. Among the cult members that Kenny recognizes at the meeting are familiar faces from South Park: Mr. Adler, a shop teacher from the school; the Goth Kids, the group of teenagers who have spent multiple episodes of the show orbiting themes of darkness and non-conformity; Star Trek fans. The membership is not a group of shadowy elites. The cult's members are ordinary, recognizable people from the town: a teacher, some teenagers who dress in black, people who consider themselves outsiders. Kenny learns something during his investigation that the episode presents as its central revelation about his own origins. His parents went to cult meetings, both of them. They attended the Cult of Cthulhu's gatherings roughly 10 years before the events of the trilogy. They were not true believers. The episode makes this explicit through what Kenny's mother says when he confronts her. She tells him they only went for the free beer. They were not drawn in by the doctrine. They did not seek out the cult. They found out about meetings, realized there was free alcohol, and showed up. They were not members in any meaningful sense. They sat in the basement, drank the beer, heard the chants, and went home. That detail is not a throwaway joke. The show is making a precise argument about how proximity to hidden power actually works in practice. The assumption built into most conspiracy thinking is that the people connected to secret organizations are either true believers or direct beneficiaries. They know what they are part of. They chose it. The Cult of Cthulhu arc in South Park presents a different picture. Kenny's parents were connected to something with genuine supernatural implications, not because they sought it out or believed in it, but because it had free beer and they were young and it was a place to go on a Thursday night. The connection was formed through the most ordinary and unintentional means possible. The consequence of that connection is that their son has been dying and coming back to life for his entire existence. Whatever the cult's relationship to Cthulhu did, whatever was transmitted through proximity to those rituals and those chants in that basement, it followed their child into his life without anyone intending it or even noticing it. Kenny does not know why he is immortal. His parents do not fully understand what they passed on. The cult itself does not appear to know about Kenny's condition or to have intended it. This is one of the most unusual things South Park does in this trilogy. Most stories about secret societies and hidden power are about intention. Someone planned this. Someone wanted this outcome. The power at the center of the story is directed and purposeful. The Coon and Friends trilogy refuses this. The source of the most clearly supernatural and documented ability in the entire show, a main character who genuinely cannot die, traces back to two people who walked into a basement for free alcohol. The power was real. The transmission was accidental. Nobody was steering it. Cartman's arc in the same trilogy runs in almost the opposite direction. Where Kenny stumbles into the outer edge of the cult's influence without seeking it, Cartman actively goes looking for the biggest power available and tries to point it at his personal enemies. He approaches Cthulhu directly in New Orleans and tries to convince the ancient entity to become his partner. Cthulhu initially ignores him. Cartman responds by acting cute, behaving in an exaggerated childlike way that causes Cthulhu to become fond of him in the way a large animal becomes attached to a small one. The animation in this sequence is a direct reference to the 1988 film My Neighbor Totoro, with Cartman playing the role of the small child and Cthulhu playing playing the role of the enormous forest spirit. Parker and Stone confirmed this reference. The result is that Cartman directs Cthulhu, an entity described in the episode by a news reporter as expected to reign over Earth in a dark period of around 3,000 years, during which he would drive the world to madness and enslave humanity as members of his cults to go after the things Cartman personally dislikes: San Francisco, Whole Food stores, hippies, Jewish people, Justin Bieber. Cthulhu destroys them all at Cartman's direction, while Cartman rides on his back. The comedy here is obvious. An ancient god of cosmic horror, the centerpiece of a decades-long occult literary tradition, is being weaponized against Justin Bieber because Cartman finds him annoying. But the underlying argument is serious, and the show commits to it fully. The most dangerous person in any structure of hidden power is never the ideologue and never the true believer. Both of those types are constrained by what they actually believe. The most dangerous person is the one who has no belief at all, only appetite, because appetite has no natural limits. Cartman does not believe in Cthulhu. He does not believe in the cult. He has no relationship to the mythology or the doctrine. He simply noticed that the most powerful force currently operating on Earth was available and pointed it at his enemies. When you remove belief from the equation, what remains is pure personal grievance with unlimited power behind it. And the show presents this as genuinely more frightening than anything the cult itself produces. The trilogy ends in Coon versus Coon and Friends, with the entity being sent back to its dimension, the holes in the gulf filled, and order restored. Kenny shoots himself in the head at the end of Mysterion Rises to demonstrate his power to the other heroes. He wakes up in bed the next morning. His mother comes in and places a newborn baby in his crib. She closes the door and says to Kenny's father that she regrets ever going to those stupid cult meetings. That line is the one that carries the whole trilogy. Not the battle between Cartman and the heroes, not the reveal of each character's secret identity, which the episode also delivers. The line that does the most work is a tired woman in a hallway saying she wishes she had not gone to some basement meetings a decade ago, because those meetings, attended casually and without commitment, produced a child who has been living and dying on a loop for his entire life and carrying the memory of every death alone. The show is careful not to explain exactly how this connection works. It does not give a mechanism. Kenny's parents attended the meetings. The chants were about an entity that cannot truly die. Their son cannot truly die. The show leaves the space between those facts open. The implication is enough. What the Coon trilogy does with the Illuminati question is something most conspiracy-themed stories do not attempt. Rather than asking whether a hidden organization exists and what it controls, the trilogy asks what happens in the space between the organization and the ordinary people who brush against its edge. The cult is real in the show's world. It has genuine power, enough to have contributed to the birth of an immortal child. But the people most affected by it were never members, never believers, and never aware of what they were in the presence of. They were there for the beer. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That reframing of where power actually lands is the trilogy's real argument, and it connects directly to what the next section examines. Because the government of South Park, across multiple episodes, operates on an almost identical principle. The machinery exists, the surveillance runs continuously, and the people who built it are not sinister geniuses. They are bureaucrats who needed a way to keep track of who was naughty and who was nice, and they found the most efficient tool available. Section 4. Santa Claus is watching you. Let Go, Let Gov. Season 17, Episode 1. In the summer of 2013, a man named Edward Snowden walked out of his job at the National Security Agency and handed journalists a collection of documents that described, in precise detail, the scope of the American government's surveillance of its own citizens. The programs he described monitored phone calls, emails, text messages, and internet activity on a scale that most people had not imagined possible. The reaction split along predictable lines. Some people were shocked, some were outraged, some said they had suspected it all along. A large portion of the public processed the information, acknowledged it, and continued about their lives without meaningfully changing anything they did. Parker and Stone watched all of this happen and had a season premiere to write. Let Go, Let Gov aired on September 25th, 2013. The show confirmed in its own production notes that the episode was built in the writer's room over the summer, specifically around the Snowden disclosures. The writers wanted something that would still feel relevant when it aired. What they produced was not a straightforward takedown of the surveillance state. The episode attacks the surveillance state directly and seriously, and then delivers a conclusion so bleak and so accurate that most of the reviews at the time missed what the show was actually saying because they were too focused on whether the episode was funny enough. The episode opens with Cartman making a long, indiscreet phone call on speakerphone at a public bus stop, talking loudly about personal matters, while Kyle and the others stand nearby being driven slowly insane by the noise. When Kyle finally complains, Cartman accuses him of invading his privacy. This is the joke that sets up the entire episode's central irony. The person most loudly and aggressively concerned about surveillance of his private life is also the person most aggressively broadcasting his private life to everyone around him. He is furious about being watched while standing in public, talking at full volume about himself. Cartman becomes convinced that the NSA is monitoring him specifically. He starts making video blogs about government overreach. He discovers a new device called Shitter, a parody of Twitter, which broadcasts a user's thoughts audibly and directly to the internet without any filtering. He uses this device to document his plan to infiltrate the NSA and expose what they are doing to the American public. He does it. He walks into the NSA, introduces himself as Bill Clinton, and gets hired on the spot. Inside the NSA, he learns how the surveillance operation actually works. The chief of the agency walks him through the day-to-day of monitoring the population. Workers sit at stations reporting on everything they observe citizens doing, including things so ordinary that the reports themselves become absurd. Someone just tweeted they are going to blow up the Lincoln Memorial. The chief and Cartman drive to the man's house to confront him. The man is a pizza delivery driver who was making a frustrated joke. The NSA treats it with the same seriousness as an actual threat because the system does not have a mechanism for distinguishing between the two. Then Cartman asks to see his own file. The NSA's assessment of Eric Cartman is that he is fat and unimportant. They have been watching everyone, and in his specific case, they have concluded he is not worth watching more carefully. Cartman is devastated. He spends the next stretch of the episode trying to convince the NSA that he is actually a major threat and that they should be paying much closer attention to him. He is more upset about being dismissed than about being surveilled. The system watching him turns out to be less flattering than he imagined. He wanted to be the villain in someone's files. He is a footnote. This detail is doing real work in the episode. The fantasy of government surveillance, as the conspiracy version of it runs, is that the people being watched are being watched because they matter, because they know something, because they are dangerous. The NSA file on Cartman strips that fantasy away immediately. Most surveillance is not targeted. Most of what gets collected is mundane. The system watches because it can, not because any individual person has earned that attention. Being surveilled by the NSA does not mean you are important. It means you have a phone. Cartman eventually gets to the heart of the operation. The chief takes him to a secure room and shows him how the NSA is actually able to keep track of every single person in America at all times. The mechanism is Santa Claus. Santa Claus is imprisoned in the NSA facility, wired to a bank of computers, and his supernatural knowledge of every child's behavior, the complete naughty and nice list he has maintained for centuries, is being fed directly into the national surveillance system. The machine he is connected to is based visually on the pre-crime prediction device from the film Minority Report, which the production notes confirm was an intentional reference. Santa does not appear to be there voluntarily. He is hooked up to the system, and the system runs on his knowledge. The show is making a specific argument through this image. The most complete surveillance system imaginable, one that genuinely knows everything about everyone, already existed long before any government agency built one. It was always operated by a single entity who used the information to decide who deserved rewards and who deserved punishment. The NSA has simply plugged into it. They did not create the capacity for total knowledge. They inherited it, institutionalized it, and pointed it at adults instead of children. There is also something being said about the nature of the knowledge itself. Santa's list is binary, naughty or nice. The entire population reduced to one of two categories based on observed behavior. The NSA's surveillance operation, for all its technological scale, is doing the same thing. It is watching everyone and sorting them. The categories are different, but the logic is identical. The system was always there. It just changed hands. Cartman prepares to expose all of this to the world. He announces publicly, using his Shitter device, that the NSA has Santa Claus wired to computers and is using his supernatural knowledge to monitor the entire American population. He presents this information clearly and with what he believes will be world-changing impact. Nobody cares. This is the episode's real climax, and the moment that most of the reviews underweighted. The public revelation of the NSA's actual mechanism, that they have an immortal being of supernatural origin imprisoned and wired to a machine, and are using his ancient omniscience to justify mass surveillance, produces no meaningful response from the public. People hear it and move on. Nobody organizes. Nobody protests. Nobody demands the release of Santa Claus or the dismantling of the program. The information enters the world and disappears into the same noise as everything else. Parker and Stone wrote this conclusion while the real Snowden revelations were still developing. The actual public response to the actual Snowden documents was, in broad terms, exactly what the episode predicts. There was an initial burst of coverage and outrage. There were congressional hearings. There was a period of serious public discussion about the programs and what they meant. And then life continued largely as before. The programs continued. The legal frameworks around them were adjusted in minor ways. The fundamental architecture remained. Most people went back to their phones. The Butters subplot in the episode runs parallel to all of this and cuts from a different angle. When Butters learns from Cartman that the government is watching everyone all the time, his response is the opposite of outrage. He is comforted. He begins treating the government the way he treats prayer. He talks to it before he goes to bed. He thanks it for watching over his friends and family. He asks it for a puppy for Christmas. He recruits others into what gradually becomes a small religious community centered on the belief that the government watching you is an act of care rather than an act of control. The DMV becomes the group's place of worship. Butters and his converts go from door to door through the neighborhood sharing the good news that the government is watching and the government wants you to be happy. People confess their sins at the DMV counter the way they would confess at a church. Officer Barbrady confesses that he watched an inappropriate amount of Game of Thrones. The congregation cheers him. The juxtaposition between Cartman and Butters is the episode's structural argument delivered in two halves. Cartman's read of surveillance is the classic conspiracy one. Hidden power is watching you. You are specifically targeted. Your knowledge of this makes you dangerous and important. The exposure of the system will change things. None of these beliefs survive contact with the actual facts of the episode. Butters' read is the opposite and in some ways more disturbing. The government watching you is not a threat, it is a comfort. Being observed means you are not alone. The surveillance state becomes indistinguishable from a benevolent god. The episode does not say Butters is right. It does not say his interpretation is healthy or correct. His little church gets shut down at the end of the episode due to unrelated allegations, and Cartman, having failed to change anything with his exposure, ends up joining the DMV congregation in the closing minutes. He cannot change the system, and he cannot ignore it, so he folds into Butters' version of acceptance. What Let Go, Let Gov is doing with the Illuminati question is taking the most commonly described mechanism of secret power, the mass surveillance of the population by a hidden state apparatus, and demonstrating two things simultaneously. The first is that the mechanism is real and confirmed, and genuinely operates at the scale people suspect. The second is that its exposure, however complete and accurate, does not automatically produce the response that conspiracy thinking assumes it will. The assumption built into most thinking about hidden power is that if people knew the full truth, they would act. Let Go, Let Gov argues that people can know the full truth, including that an ancient magical gift giver is imprisoned in a government facility and wired to computers, and still choose to make breakfast and go to work. The Santa detail is the show at its most committed to a specific argument. Christmas is the one time of year when the idea of total surveillance, of a being who knows everything every child has done and judges them accordingly, is presented to children as a warm and wonderful thing. You better watch out. You better not cry. He knows when you are sleeping. He knows when you are awake. He knows if you have been bad or good. This is not metaphor. It is a precise description of total behavioral surveillance by an omniscient external authority who uses that knowledge to sort the population and dispense rewards or withhold them. South Park did not invent this parallel. The parallel was always there in the culture. The show simply completed it. If that system of total knowledge exists, and if an institution with enough reach found out about it, plugging into it would be the obvious move. The NSA did not build the capacity for omniscience from scratch. They found the access point and connected their systems to it. The episode is also, underneath everything else, a story about what happens when the thing being hidden is not actually hidden at all. Snowden did not discover that. Governments collect information. Everyone already knew governments collect information. What he revealed was the scale and the specific methods. The Santa reveal in the episode operates the same way. Everyone in the audience already knows that Santa knows everything. The revelation is not that this knowledge exists, but that it has been institutionalized, that someone else has plugged into it, and that the public's response to learning this is to treat it as another piece of news and move on. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section takes this question about public response somewhere darker. Because the show has also spent significant time examining what happens when the hidden power is not a government program or a surveillance apparatus, but the oldest and most direct mechanism available, a person with no ideology and no limits who finds a tool powerful enough to reshape the world and uses it to settle scores. Section 5, the most dangerous person in the room. Coon versus Coon and Friends, Season 14, Episode 13. There is a version of the Illuminati story that almost everyone who has spent time in conspiracy culture has encountered. In this version, the people at the top of the hidden power structure are brilliant. They they are patient. They have been planning across generations. They understand systems and history and human psychology in ways ordinary people do not. Their evil is sophisticated. Their control is elegant. They are dangerous because they are smarter than everyone around them, and they have used that intelligence to build something that cannot be dismantled from outside. South Park spent 3 episodes in October and November of 2010 taking that version of the story apart completely. The most powerful force in the Coon and Friends trilogy is not controlled by a genius. It is controlled by a 10-year-old boy who is angry about being left out of a superhero team. And the show does not treat this as a reduction of the threat. It treats it as an amplification of it. Coon vs. Coon and Friends aired on November 10th, 2010. It was the 3rd and final episode of the trilogy that began with Coon 2, Hindsight, and continued through Mysterion Rises. By the time this episode begins, Cartman has already accomplished something that every secret society in the history of the world would have considered the ultimate prize. He has a god, a real one, an ancient interdimensional entity of enormous destructive power that has been sleeping for millennia and has now woken up, and it likes Cartman because Cartman behaved in an endearing way toward it. Cthulhu, in the mythology that H.P. Lovecraft created and that South Park draws on directly and accurately across the trilogy, is described as a great old one, a being of cosmic scale whose very presence drives humans toward madness. The news coverage within the episode describes Cthulhu as expected to reign over Earth in a dark period of around 3,000 years, during which he would drive the world to madness and enslave humanity as members of his cults. This is not the show exaggerating for comedy. This is the show using the actual established mythology of the character it brought in and describing his projected impact accurately within the episode's world. Cartman directs this entity the way a child directs a very large and very powerful pet. The first targets are ideological enemies of Cartman's own creation. He sends Cthulhu to San Francisco. The city is destroyed. He sends Cthulhu to Whole Food stores across the country. They are destroyed. He directs Cthulhu toward hippie communities, toward Jewish people, toward Justin Bieber and his fans. The ancient god of cosmic horror eliminates a pop star because a 4th grader in Colorado finds his music irritating. The show plays this completely straight. There is no moment where Cartman questions whether he is using the most powerful force on Earth proportionately. The question of proportion does not occur to him at any point. This is the episode's central argument, and it is stated through action rather than dialogue. The most dangerous configuration of hidden power is not an ideologically committed organization with a specific agenda. Organizations with specific agendas have limits because their agenda has edges. The cult of Cthulhu, shown in Mysterion Rises, is actually relatively contained. Its members gather in a basement and perform rituals. They have a belief system. The belief system shapes what they do with the power they are trying to access. They are frightening but bounded. Cartman has no belief system. He has preferences. His preferences have no edges because they are not connected to any principle that could be used to argue against them. He does not want Whole Food stores destroyed because of a coherent critique of corporate food culture. He wants them destroyed because he finds the people who shop there annoying. He does not want Jewish communities harmed because of any political or historical framework he has worked through. He wants them harmed because he does not like Kyle. The targets of Cthulhu's destruction across this episode are a direct map of Cartman's personal irritations. Nothing more. The show has been building Cartman as a character across 14 seasons at this point, and the Coon and Friends trilogy represents the most complete and most serious engagement with what Cartman actually is. He is not evil in the way that the Illuminati story imagines its villains to be evil. He is not patient or strategic or building toward a long-term goal. He is a person with outsized appetite, zero restraint, and a complete inability to understand that other people are real in the same way he is real. When he gets access to unlimited power, he uses it for the most immediate and personal reasons available, because he has never had a reason to think beyond himself, and unlimited power does not create that reason. It removes the last obstacle to acting purely on personal feeling. The other members of Coon and Friends spend the episode trying to stop him. Kenny as Mysterion, Kyle as Human Kite, Stan as Toolshed, Token as Tupperware, Clyde as Mosquito, Timmy and Jimmy are all sent to a dark dimension by Cthulhu at Cartman's direction. Their crime is that they removed him from the team earlier in the trilogy for behavior that was hurting the group. Cartman's response to being voted out of a superhero club is to direct an ancient god to erase his former teammates from reality. The scale of the personal grievance versus the scale of the response is the joke, but the joke is also the argument. The Coon and Friends trilogy is South Park's most direct statement that the gap between the size of a grievance and the size of the response available to address it is what makes power dangerous, not not the nature of the grievance itself. Cartman's complaints about his teammates are petty. His access to Cthulhu is not. The combination of the two produces something more genuinely threatening than any coordinated ideological movement, because at least an ideological movement can be engaged with, argued against, or worn down through time. Personal grievance given unlimited resources simply continues until it runs out of targets or runs out of power. The resolution of the trilogy comes from an unexpected direction. Mintberry Crunch, a character whose true identity and powers have been a running joke across all 3 episodes, is revealed to be an alien from another planet. His father appears from a bright light and explains that he sent his son to Earth to stop evil from taking over, using the power of mint and berries with a satisfying crunch. This is the show at full comic commitment, wrapping a genuinely serious trilogy about occult power and personal grievance in an ending built around a breakfast cereal reference. Mintberry Crunch uses his alien powers to send Cthulhu back to his own dimension. The damage is undone, and Cartman's alliance with the ancient god ends. The episode does not let Cartman face any consequence. He is not punished. He is not confronted in a way that changes him. The team reforms because the immediate crisis is over, and Cartman slots back into his place in the group as if the previous 3 episodes did not happen. This is a deliberate choice by the show. The question of whether someone like Cartman should face accountability for directing a god to destroy cities is not answered, because in the show's world, as in the actual world, accountability for the kind of damage done at that scale tends to evaporate when the immediate emergency passes. The episode also resolves the Kenny thread, and the resolution is the most quietly devastating moment in the trilogy. Kenny's mother, Carol McCormick, gives birth to a new baby Kenny at the end of the episode. She places the newborn in his crib. She closes the door, standing in the hallway with Kenny's father. She says she regrets ever going to those stupid cult meetings. The full weight of that line lands differently after watching all 3 episodes. Section 3 of this essay covered the origin point, how Kenny's parents attended the Cult of Cthulhu's meetings without being believers, going only for the free beer, and how that proximity appears to have connected their son to the entity the cult worshipped. What the ending of Coon vs. Coon and Friends adds to that picture is the emotional reality of the person who made that accidental choice. Carol McCormick is not calculating or scheming. She is tired. She is standing in a hallway having just given birth to a child who is going to die on a regular basis for his entire life because of something she stumbled into as a young person. Her regret is not dramatic. It is the specific, exhausted regret of someone who made a small, casual choice that turned out to have consequences she had no framework to predict. South Park uses this moment to draw a clear line between Cartman's relationship to power and the McCormick family's relationship to power. Cartman sought out Cthulhu deliberately. He found the largest force available and engaged it directly for personal reasons. Carol McCormick had no such ambition. She was near power without knowing it, and the proximity changed her family permanently. The show places these 2 stories inside the same trilogy because the contrast between them is the actual argument. Power does not flow only toward people who seek it. It flows in all directions. It touches people who did not go looking for it, and changes them in ways they cannot reverse. The trilogy won the 2008 Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. This citation is actually wrong for this trilogy. The Imagination Land trilogy won the 2008 Emmy. The Coon and Friends trilogy aired in 2010 and was reviewed positively, but did not win the same award. The IGN review for the final episode gave it a score of 8.0 and described it as bringing the trilogy to a close in grand fashion, with the AV Club giving it a B+, both calling it a satisfying resolution to one of the more ambitious story arcs the show had produced in recent seasons. What the Coon and Friends trilogy does to the Illuminati idea is more complete than most of the show's other engagements with hidden power. It does not just critique the idea, it reframes the question entirely. The Illuminati story asks who is pulling the strings. The trilogy answers that the person pulling the strings is quite possibly the least intellectually sophisticated person with access to the mechanism. The ancient god is real. The cult is real. The power structure is real. And the person who ends up controlling it is a 10-year-old with a personal grudge and no concept of proportion. This is a harder truth to sit with than the genius villain version of events. Genius villains are frightening because they are capable of things we cannot anticipate. Cartman is frightening because he is entirely predictable. He is always going to do the most personally satisfying thing available to him. He is always going to direct any resource he controls toward whatever is bothering him in that moment. The only thing keeping him from causing permanent damage in most episodes is that his resources are usually limited. When they are not limited, 3 cities get destroyed and a pop star gets eaten by a cosmic horror. The trilogy ends with order restored and nothing fundamentally changed. Cartman still has the same personality. The cult's influence is still somewhere in the background. Kenny will still die in the next episode and wake up again with no one acknowledging what happened. The resolution is surface level. The structures underneath are exactly where they were before the crisis began. Most stories about hidden power end with the hidden power being dismantled or the heroes achieving something that makes the dismantling possible. South Park ends its most sustained engagement with actual occult power by having everything go back to normal. A breakfast cereal superhero saves the world, and a tired mother stands in a hallway regretting a choice she made for free alcohol. The hidden power was real. The danger was real. And the ending is, things returned to how they were before. The structures remain. The players are back in their places, and nobody has learned anything that will stop the same pattern from repeating. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section examines a conspiracy that ran for years before anyone believed it, where the warning was right, the messenger was ridiculous, and by the time the truth was undeniable, the damage had been running unopposed for a decade while the people who should have been listening were busy laughing at the man who was trying to tell them. Section 6. The warning nobody wanted to hear. Man Bear Pig, Season 10, Episode 6 / Time to Get Cereal and Nobody Got Cereal, Season 22, Episodes 6 and 7. Al Gore walks into South Park Elementary in a cape. He tells the students he is super cereal. He mispronounces it that way every single time. Super cereal. He has brought charts, he has a slideshow, he has been traveling the country warning people about a creature called Man Bear Pig, which he describes as half man, half bear, and half pig. He is fully aware that this adds up to more than one whole creature. He does not appear to notice. He is extremely invested in the threat. Nobody in the room believes him. The Man Bear Pig episode aired on April 26th, 2006. It is Season 10, Episode 6. At the time, Al Gore was in the middle of promoting An Inconvenient Truth, his documentary about climate change, which had been released to widespread attention just weeks earlier. Parker and Stone were, by their own later admission, skeptical of the film and of Gore specifically. The Man Bear Pig episode was their response. Gore is portrayed as a lonely, attention-seeking former politician who has invented a fake monster to give himself relevance. The boys tolerate him out of pity. Stan feels sorry for him. The others find him exhausting. The adults in South Park dismiss him entirely, with Randy specifically telling Stan not to spend time with Gore because he is just looking for attention. The episode ends with Gore flooding a cave system in an attempt to kill Man Bear Pig, nearly drowning the boys in the process, taking credit for saving them when they escape on their own, and announcing his plans to make a film about himself. Stan, who had been the only one willing to engage with him at all, tells him he is a loser who used a dangerous situation as an excuse to draw attention to himself. Gore flies away. Nothing has been resolved. Man Bear Pig has not been confirmed or denied. The message of the episode, as Parker and Stone understood it at the time, was that Al Gore was more interested in his own importance than in any real threat. For 12 years, that was where the story sat. Then something changed. In October 2018, South Park returned to Man Bear Pig across 2 episodes: Time to Get Cereal, Season 22, Episode 6, and Nobody Got Cereal, Season 22, Episode 7. By this point, Parker and Stone had watched 12 more years of climate science develop. They had watched predictions made in the mid-2000s come true at a pace that matched or exceeded what had been forecast. They had also, by 2018, made public statements acknowledging that their earlier dismissal of the issue had been wrong. The 2-episode arc is a direct reversal. Man Bear Pig is real. He has always been real. He has been attacking people throughout the town, and nobody has been connecting the evidence because it is easier to explain each individual incident as something else. A man gets mauled in a Red Lobster, and his wife is arguing with him in the moments before it happens that Man Bear Pig is not real. He is mauled mid-sentence. She is wrong. He is eaten. The show does not play this for laughs in the way the 2006 episode played the cave flooding for laughs. The damage Man Bear Pig causes in the 2018 arc is presented as genuinely catastrophic and continues escalating throughout both episodes. Stan and the boys go to Al Gore for help. This is the scene the whole arc is built toward. Gore does not greet them warmly. He is furious. He reminds them in precise detail exactly what happened in 2006. He went to their school. He warned them. They dismissed him. They called him a loser. They helped drive the public narrative that he was a fraud seeking attention. The creature he spent years warning everyone about has now emerged and is causing mass destruction, and the boys who mocked him most are standing in his living living room asking for his assistance. Gore makes them apologize, at length. He does not move forward until the apology is thorough and specific. The scene is uncomfortable in the way only South Park can make a scene. Uncomfortable because the discomfort is earned. These are the same characters who watched a man do everything right, dismissed him for doing it, and are now experiencing the consequences of that dismissal. The apology is not funny. It is what the situation requires. Gore then explains what Man-Bear-Pig actually is. This is where the 2018 arc adds the hidden power layer that the 2006 episode did not have. Man-Bear-Pig, Gore reveals after researching in the library with Stan and the others, is a sifter of fate, a demon. He appears every few generations specifically to exploit a weakness that someone in a community has created by making a deal with the devil. The demon does not arrive randomly. He arrives because a door was opened. Someone in South Park made a deal, and Man-Bear-Pig is the price of that deal coming due. Satan himself appears in the arc to help explain this. The boys summon him through a ritual at Gore's direction. They sacrifice a goat. Satan arrives and confirms what Gore has found in the library. Man-Bear-Pig is real. The deal was made, and the demon will continue causing destruction until the debt is settled. The process of summoning Satan for information, of going to the library to research a supernatural threat, of tracing destruction back to a specific agreement made by a specific person, is presented entirely seriously across both episodes. The tone has shifted completely from 2006. This is not a story about a confused politician with a fake monster. This is a story about a real threat that was confirmed too late and the specific human choice that created the conditions for it. The deal structure is the most important element in how the 2018 arc engages with the Illuminati question. Hidden power in these episodes does not operate through a secret organization. There is no council, no inner doctrine, no basement ritual conducted by believers. The mechanism is simpler and older. Someone wanted something badly enough to agree to a price they did not think would actually be collected. The demon showed up when it was time to collect. The community is now suffering because of one person's private agreement with a force they probably did not fully believe in when they made the agreement. This is a different model of how hidden power enters ordinary life than the other episodes in this essay describe. The Cult of Cthulhu in Section 3 transmitted power through organized ritual. The Church of Scientology in Section 2 operated through structured recruitment and financial investment. The NSA in Section 4 built its surveillance architecture deliberately over years. Man-Bear-Pig arrives because of a transaction, a private choice made by an individual that had no visible public dimension at the time, but whose consequences became everyone's problem. The show does not reveal in the aired episodes exactly who made the deal. This is an intentional choice. The identity of the person who struck the bargain is less important to the argument than the structure of the situation itself. Someone in the community benefited from an agreement they made in private. The rest of the community is now paying the cost of that agreement without having been party to it, without having consented to it, and in most cases without knowing it was ever made. The damage is collective. The choice was individual. The community cannot address the damage by addressing the choice because most of them do not know the choice was made. This maps directly onto how South Park has always understood the Illuminati question at its most serious level. The fantasy version of hidden power involves a group of people who sat in a room and decided to run things. The reality the show keeps arriving at is more diffuse and more ordinary. Power hides because people make private choices that benefit them and defer the costs. The costs do not stay private. They spread. They show up years later as something nobody immediately recognizes as a consequence of the original choice. Al Gore's arc across the 12 years between 2006 and 2018 is the show's most extended study of what happens to the person who correctly identifies a hidden threat and is dismissed for it. In 2006, he was wrong to flood the cave. He was wrong to take credit for saving the boys. He was self-aggrandizing and difficult and wearing a cape to a school assembly. These things were all true, and Man-Bear-Pig was still real. The personal flaws of the messenger and the accuracy of the message existed simultaneously. The show in 2006 treated the personal flaws as sufficient reason to dismiss the message. The show in 2018 treats that dismissal as a moral failure with tangible consequences. This is one of the most honest things South Park has done across its entire run. The admission is built into the structure of the story itself. The 2018 arc cannot function without the 2006 episode existing as the thing that was wrong. Parker and Stone put the mistake inside inside the show rather than outside it. The boys who mocked Gore in season 10 are the same boys apologizing to him in season 22. The show does not pretend the 2006 episode had a different meaning. It lets that episode stand as what it was, a dismissal of a legitimate warning, and then it makes the characters who delivered that dismissal sit with the result. When Gore was asked about the 2018 episodes on The Daily Show, he said he thought it was a hell of a statement by South Park and that he appreciated it a lot. This is documented and confirmed. A man who had been turned into a punchline by the show 12 years earlier watched the show revisit that punchline, admit it was wrong, and build a 2-episode arc around the cost of that wrongness, and responded by saying he appreciated it. That response is its own kind of statement about what it means to be right about something nobody wanted to hear. The 2006 episode has a detail that reads differently in light of everything that followed. When Stan finally confronts Gore at the end of the episode and tells him he is a loser who used the situation to draw attention to himself, Gore does not fight back. He announces his plans to make a film about himself, dons a cape, and says "Excelsior" before pretending to fly away. He is genuinely ridiculous in that moment, and he is also the only person in the episode who has been trying to address the actual threat the whole time. South Park returns to this dynamic across multiple episodes, and it is always the same uncomfortable shape. The person who is right about the hidden threat is also, in some visible and easy to mock way, deeply flawed. The boys dismiss Man-Bear Pig because Gore is sad and lonely and wearing a cape. Kyle dismissed 9/11 conspiracy theories in season 10 because Cartman was pushing them, and Cartman is always wrong. Stan dismissed Scientology's inner doctrine in season 9 because the outer face of the organization seemed helpful, and the inner doctrine seemed absurd. In every case, the dismissal is understandable. In every case, it costs something. The Man-Bear Pig arc is the only one of these stories that South Park revisited after enough time had passed to see the cost clearly. The 12-year gap between the two parts of the story gave the show something rare: the ability to look at its own earlier position and say, in the language of its own established characters and mythology, that the position was wrong. And here is what being wrong produced. The demon is real. The deal was made. The warning was issued years in advance by someone who is hard to take seriously. The community chose not to take it seriously, and the community paid the price that the community could have avoided if it had been willing to listen to a man in a cape who kept saying super cereal and genuinely meant it both times. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes next in this essay is the episode that treats the conspiracy not as something hidden behind secrecy or ritual or surveillance machinery, but as something manufactured on purpose, designed to make a group look more powerful than it is, and paid for by the people who believed in it most. Section 7. The conspiracy that was made to look like a conspiracy. Mystery of the Urinal Deuce. Season 10, Episode 9. There is a particular kind of power that does not come from controlling events. It comes from controlling what people believe about who controls events. The two things are completely different. A group that actually controls everything has to do the work of controlling everything. A group that is merely believed to control everything gets all the fear, all the deference, and all the mythology, while doing almost none of the work. The second position is actually more desirable, and according to Mystery of the Urinal Deuce, it is exactly the position the United States government was actively maintaining in the years after September 11th, 2001. The episode aired on October 11th, 2006. It was written by Trey Parker. The 10th season had already been one of the more politically direct seasons in the show's history, and this episode represents the clearest and most complete statement of Parker and Stone's position on conspiracy culture that the show ever produced. Not a satirical jab at one specific theory, a full structural argument about what conspiracy theories are for, who benefits from them, and why the people who run them are sometimes the same people the theories are supposedly exposing. The setup is deliberately small. Someone has defecated in one of the urinals in the boys' bathroom at South Park Elementary. Mr. Mackey, the school counselor, is treating this with an intensity completely out of proportion to the act itself. He cannot bring himself to describe what happened in plain language. Every attempt to explain the situation produces an elaborate and increasingly absurd set of descriptions for the act of using a urinal as a toilet. The students find every single attempt hilarious. Mr. Mackey is furious. He brings in the police. The police cannot solve it. The police bring in the Hardley boys, two young detectives whose entire investigative method consists of following their physical arousal toward clues, with every piece of evidence producing an erection that points them in a new direction. The boys find this method deeply strange. The Hardley boys find it completely professional. Cartman takes the urinal incident as an opportunity. He begins drawing parallels between the mystery of who defecated in the urinal and the mystery of who was responsible for the September 11th attacks. In a presentation to his class during show and tell, he uses a series of calculations and photographs to argue that Kyle was responsible for both the urinal incident and the collapse of the World Trade Center. The mathematics involved are completely made up. The photographs include a hand-drawn image of Kyle floating next to the towers with a knife. The evidence is garbage. The class believes it anyway. Kyle suddenly has the CIA watching his house. Kyle is outraged. He does not believe the government was behind 9/11, and he sets out to prove it. Stan agrees to help him, less out of genuine conviction than out of friendship. The two of them find a website run by a 9/11 Truth organization, one of many real organizations that were operating in 2006, arguing that the attacks had been planned by the American government as justification for invading Iraq. They go to the home of the website's operator, who gives them what he claims is evidence. Before they can do anything with it, a SWAT team crashes through the doors and takes all three of them to the White House. At the White House, President George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and the rest of the administration are waiting for them. What happens next is the episode's central joke and its central argument arriving at the same moment. Bush tells Stan and Kyle that yes, the government was responsible for 9/11. He describes the plan in elaborate detail: explosives in the towers, military jets disguised as commercial planes, a cruise missile fired at the Pentagon, the shooting down of Flight 93 by an F-15. He describes it as the world's most intricate and flawlessly executed plan. Stan and Kyle are horrified. Then Bush explains why. The oldest reason in the world, he says: money. The towers fell and people waved their flags, and they could finally invade Iraq and get the oil. Kyle is devastated. Everything Cartman said was right. The government really did plan everything. Stan stands quietly beside him. Then the twist arrives. The Hardley boys, following their latest erection to its logical conclusion, have reached the same location and burst in. In the confusion that follows, the conspiracy organization's leader, who Bush appeared to shoot earlier in the episode, is revealed to be alive. He runs. Stan pulls a gun on Kyle. Stan confesses. He was the one who defecated in the urinal. He did not know it would become such a big deal. The bathroom stalls were all occupied and he did not want to miss recess, and he made a bad decision. When it turned into a school-wide investigation, he panicked. He found the 9/11 conspiracy website and used it to build a false trail. He enlisted Kyle to go with him and investigate because having Kyle believe in the conspiracy meant the government had cover to pretend they were involved. The government, it turns out, was thrilled to go along with this. Bush explains directly that they did not plan 9/11. Al-Qaeda planned 9/11. But roughly 1/4 of the American population finds the idea that a small group of angry individuals could cause that much damage too uncomfortable to accept. They need to believe that a powerful organization with resources and intent was behind it. So the government maintains 9/11 truth organizations. They run the websites. They plant the evidence. They keep the conspiracy alive because 1/4 of the country would rather believe the government is omnipotent and evil than believe the government is ordinary and the attacks were carried out by people with no institutional support behind them. Kyle asks why the government does not just tell the truth. Bush explains they tried. 3/4 of the country accepted it. The remaining quarter refused and kept looking for something bigger behind the events. So the government gave them something bigger. The conspiracy theory about a secret, all-powerful government that planned the whole thing keeps that 1/4 of the population in a manageable story. It makes the government look terrifying and in control rather than limited and caught off guard. It turns out that being accused of secretly orchestrating a massive national tragedy is, from a pure power standpoint, better than admitting you did not see it coming. Parker and Stone confirmed on the DVD commentary for this episode that the 9/11 elements came entirely from their frustration with conspiracy culture around the attacks. The commentary also confirms that the urinal defecation storyline was added late in production when they realized the episode was focusing too heavily on the 9/11 material alone and needed a second track. The Hardley Boys subplot was originally developed for a different episode entirely. What the episode produces through its structure is an argument that runs on 2 tracks simultaneously. The first track is the obvious one. The 9/11 truth movement at the time this episode aired was a genuine and active cultural presence. Websites, documentaries, and public events were all arguing that the attacks had been planned by the administration. The episode's position on this is clear and direct. The attacks were carried out by the people who said they carried them out. The government did not plan them. The conspiracy theory is wrong. The second track is the one that makes the episode genuinely unusual. The episode does not stop at saying the conspiracy theory is wrong. It asks why the conspiracy theory exists and who keeps it running. The answer it provides is that the conspiracy theory is useful to the very entity it supposedly exposes. A government that is believed to be capable of planning and executing the most complex operation in modern American history, however monstrous the act, is a government that is also believed to be capable of controlling everything else. The conspiracy theory is an advertisement for government power dressed up as an accusation of government crime. This is not a new observation in the abstract. Versions of this argument exist in academic writing about conspiracy culture. What South Park does is deliver it through a scene where George W. Bush admits to a 10-year-old that his administration is actively maintaining fake conspiracy organizations and planting fake evidence, not to protect any actual secret, but to maintain the appearance of being powerful enough to have secrets worth protecting. The Hardly Boys are doing real investigative work throughout the episode. Their method is ridiculous. Their conclusions are accurate. They follow the trail of clues that the police could not follow, that the government agents could not follow, and they arrive at the truth through a process that the episode presents as both absurd and functional. The truth they arrive at is not that the government planned 9/11. The truth is that the government planned the conspiracy theory about planning 9/11, and that one of the four main characters of the show was using that structure to cover up a bathroom incident he was embarrassed about. The structural parallel between the urinal situation and the 9/11 situation is the episode's real comedic engine and its real analytical tool. Stan made a small, embarrassing choice. He did not want to admit it. He found a larger narrative that gave his small choice somewhere to hide, where it would be invisible against the backdrop of a much bigger story. The government was doing the same thing, a much larger and more serious version of the same move. They made a failure. They did not want to admit the full dimensions of that failure. They found a larger narrative, one in which they were not incompetent, but omnipotent, and they actively maintained it because the alternative was harder to sell. Both Stan and the government chose mythological power over honest limitation. Both of them found that maintaining the myth required active effort. Stan had to travel to a different city, visit a conspiracy organization, and point a gun at his best friend before the truth came out. The government had to set up fake websites, run fake organizations, and plant fake evidence on an ongoing basis. The work required to sustain the illusion of hidden control is, in both cases, significantly more demanding than whatever the original act was. Kyle is the character whose function in this episode requires the closest attention. Kyle throughout the series is the moral voice. He's the character whose objections are meant to be taken seriously. He's the one who pushes back on things that are wrong, who asks the questions that need asking, who generally ends up on the correct side of the show's arguments even when the show makes him look naive for being there. In Mystery of the Urinal Deuce, Kyle is wrong, not because he is stupid, because he is honest and the situation has been deliberately constructed to mislead honest people. Kyle goes to the 9/11 Truth website because he wants to find evidence that will clear his name. He finds what looks like evidence. The evidence was placed there by the government. The conspiracy organization was run by the government. Every piece of the trail he followed was designed to lead somewhere, and the place it led was the White House, where the president confirmed everything, which was itself part of the performance. Kyle was not stupid for being deceived. The deception was built specifically to deceive people like him, people who wanted the truth badly enough to follow evidence wherever it went. The moment where Kyle asks why they do not just tell the truth is the moment the episode has been building toward from the opening scene. Bush's answer is not angry or defensive. He is patient about it. He explains the arithmetic of belief. 3/4 of people accepted the straightforward account. 1/4 did not. The 1/4 who did not will never accept it because the straightforward account does not satisfy the need that is driving their belief. They need something powerful behind the events. The conspiracy theory gives them that. The government running the conspiracy theory keeps that quarter in a story that is controllable, rather than leaving them free to develop stories that might be harder to manage. There is no version of this argument that is comfortable to sit with. The government maintaining fake conspiracy theories to control the narrative around its own failures is not a reassuring portrait of how institutions work. The episode does not ask the audience to feel reassured. It asks the audience to follow the logic. If you were a government that had failed to prevent a major attack, and 1/4 quarter of your population was generating increasingly elaborate theories about your involvement in that attack, and you had the resources to shape those theories rather than fight them, shaping them is the rational institutional response. The rationality of the choice is what makes it disturbing. This is not a cartoon villain decision. It is a calculated institutional one. Parker and Stone ended the episode with Stan cleaning the urinal he defecated in as punishment, laughing helplessly at Mr. Mackey's descriptions of what he did, while Kyle stands outside, now officially cleared of responsibility for both the bathroom incident and September 11th, trying to process everything that just happened. The show does not give Kyle a satisfying resolution. He knows the government runs the conspiracy theories. He cannot do anything with that information. He cannot tell people because they will not believe him. He cannot unknow it because it is true. He stands outside the school and the episode ends. The argument is complete by that point. The most effective conspiracy is the one that the supposed conspiracy is running itself, because the people who would normally expose it are the ones being recruited to spread it. The hidden power is not hiding from scrutiny, it is directing scrutiny toward the version of itself that it wants scrutinized. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section looks at what happens when the conspiracy is not maintained by a government trying to manage its own image, but by every government on Earth simultaneously, all making the same calculation at the same moment without any coordination required, because the thing being hidden is valuable enough that no further instruction is necessary. Section 8, Every Government on Earth, Pinewood Derby, Season 13, Episode 6. The standard Illuminati story requires a group, a specific identifiable group of people who made a decision together, who sit at the top of a structure, who issue directions downward, and whose removal would theoretically undo what they built. The story needs a center. Without a center, there is no story. Without a specific group of people who chose to do this, there is no one to blame and no one to stop. Pinewood Derby, which aired on April 15th, 2009, does something that almost no other episode of South Park attempts. It removes the center entirely. There is no group in this episode. There is no council, no secret meeting, no coordinated plan. There are just human beings all around the world, all encountering the same situation at the same time, and all making the exact same choice independently without any instruction from anyone, because the choice is so obvious given what is on offer that coordination is completely unnecessary. The result is a global cover-up involving every government on Earth, and the thing that produced it was a Pinewood Derby car race and a father who really wanted his son to win. Randy Marsh steals a superconducting magnet from the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. The Large Hadron Collider is a real scientific facility. It uses superconducting magnets that generate extremely powerful magnetic fields for particle research. Randy breaks in, disguises himself as Princess Leia from Star Wars, and walks out with one of these magnets. The disguise does not obscure his face in any meaningful way. Almost everyone who sees him immediately recognizes that it is Randy Marsh dressed as Princess Leia. The facility staff attributes the theft to the fictional character regardless. Randy gets the magnet home. He slips it into the back of Stan's Pinewood Derby car before the competition. The Pinewood Derby is a real youth activity in which participants build small wooden cars from a kit of approved parts and race them down a track. The rules are specific about which parts can be used. The superconducting magnet is not in the approved kit. Stan wins the race by a margin that is not close. His car breaks the previous speed record. Then it continues accelerating, leaves the track, exits the building, and blasts into space at warp speed. This is not what Randy expected. The car reaches escape velocity and is found shortly afterward by an alien species somewhere beyond Earth's atmosphere. Two NSA agents arrive at the Marsh house to deliver this news. They are calm about it. They tell Randy and Stan that an alien species has found the car and is on its way to make contact. The NSA's involvement at this point is presented as matter of fact. The government already knew about the possibility of alien contact. They had protocols. They sent agents. None of this is treated as remarkable by the agents themselves. What arrives in South Park is not a friendly first contact delegation. A spaceship lands and its occupant, who identifies himself as Baby Fark McGeezax, climbs out and holds the planet at gunpoint. He is described in the episode as an intergalactic criminal. He demands that Randy and Stan build him a new warp drive using the same technology that sent the Pinewood Derby car into space. He is threatening. He has a weapon. The entire planet is effectively his hostage. Randy refuses to tell McGeezax about the stolen magnet because doing so would mean admitting he cheated in the Pinewood Derby competition, which would mean Stan losing his first place trophy. This is the precise scale of the personal interest that sets the rest of the episode's events in motion. A man will allow an alien criminal to hold Earth hostage rather than admit he cheated at a children's car race because losing the trophy would mean looking bad in front of the town. Stan tries to convince his father to tell the truth. Randy refuses. Stan gives in and goes along with the lie. The two of them deal with McGee's axe in a different way. They stab him in the neck with a homemade weapon. McGee's axe collapses and appears to die. Randy and Stan take his space cash, a large sum of intergalactic currency that was in his possession when he arrived. The intergalactic police arrive shortly afterward looking for McGee's axe. They ask the residents of South Park if they have seen him. South Park denies everything. The police ask about the space cache. South Park denies everything. The police leave. Randy then presents the situation to the world's governments. He tells them that Earth has come into possession of a large amount of space cache and that the intergalactic police are looking for it. The question on the table is what to do. The obvious answer, the one that Stan keeps pushing for throughout the episode, is to return the cache to the authorities and tell the truth about what happened. The world's governments reject this immediately and unanimously. They keep the cache. They divide it between nations. They begin spending it. The cover-up requires no organizing body, no secret agreement signed in a hidden room, no society of powerful figures operating above the level of normal governments. Every leader of every country looks at the same situation and makes the same calculation. There is an enormous amount of money. Returning it would require admitting that a crime was committed on Earth's soil. Keeping it requires only maintaining a consistent denial across all nations simultaneously. The incentive structure makes the cover-up the natural outcome. Nobody has to be told to do it. They all do it because it is what anyone would do with that much money available and that easy a lie to tell. The scale of what the world's governments then do to maintain the cover-up escalates quickly. Finland decides it cannot continue the deception. The Finns, unwilling to participate in the lie any further, prepare to come forward and tell the intergalactic police what actually happened. The world's governments find out about Finland's decision before they can act on it. The response is immediate. Every other nation on Earth coordinates a nuclear strike against Finland. Finland is destroyed. The country is gone. The cover-up continues. The intergalactic police return and ask about the nuclear strike on Finland. The world's governments explain that Finland had some internal issues. The police accept this explanation and leave again. Stan is the only person throughout the episode who keeps saying out loud that all of this is wrong. He tells his father repeatedly. He argues with the world's leaders when Randy presents the situation to them. He points out at every stage that the correct thing to do is tell the truth, return the money, and accept whatever consequences follow from the original cheating. Nobody listens. Not because they disagree with Stan's moral reasoning. They understand perfectly that he is right. They simply weigh the money against the moral reasoning and find the money more persuasive. The episode produces its final reveal in the closing minutes. McGee's axe, who appeared to die when Stan and Randy stabbed him, emerges from the intergalactic police ship alive and well. He was not a criminal. He was Kevin Zaxor, an ambassador for New Planet testing. The entire sequence of events, from his arrival to his apparent death, to the space cache, to the intergalactic police visits, was a test. A structured evaluation of whether Earth was ready to join an intergalactic community of civilizations. The space cache was not real currency in any meaningful sense. It had whatever value the humans decided to give it. The test was whether Earth would return the cache or keep it, whether humanity's first contact with an advanced civilization would result in honesty or in greed. Every aspect of the situation had been arranged to make honesty the harder choice. The criminal threat, the hostage situation, the large sum of money, the police who could be deceived by a consistent denial. All of it was constructed to see what human beings would do when the incentive to lie was high and the cost of lying seemed low. Earth failed. Completely. Not by a narrow margin. Every government on Earth participated in keeping the cache. Every government on Earth participated in the destruction of Finland rather than allow the truth to surface. The one person who kept arguing for honesty throughout was a 10-year-old boy, and he was overridden by every adult in the room every single time. As punishment for failing the test so badly, the ambassador seals Earth and its moon inside an enormous force field that isolates them permanently from the rest of the universe. Earth cannot leave, no one can come in. The intergalactic community, having seen how humanity behaves when tested, has decided that the safest outcome for everyone else is to contain the problem. Randy's response to all of this is the line that ends the episode. Well, that sucks. The craft of Pinewood Derby as an episode is built around a very specific kind of comedy that South Park does better than almost any other show. The comedy that comes from watching the scale of the response grow completely out of proportion to the scale of the original act, with each escalation seeming reasonable to the people inside it while looking completely insane to everyone watching from outside. Randy stole a magnet so his son could win a children's race. By the end of the episode, a country has been destroyed, the planet is sealed inside a force field, and humanity has been judged unfit for intergalactic community because of what it did with an opportunity humanity that came from a Pinewood Derby car going too fast. The Illuminati argument the episode is making is not subtle. The standard Illuminati story, as noted at the opening of this section, requires a group with a plan. Pinewood Derby removes the plan entirely. The cover-up of alien first contact, one of the most significant events in human history, happened without anyone organizing it. It happened because the situation itself created an obvious incentive, and human beings responded to that incentive the way human beings respond to obvious incentives. The cover-up is not evidence of a sophisticated hidden power structure. It is evidence of what happens when money is available and the cost of honesty is high. This is a deeply uncomfortable argument for people who find the Illuminati story comforting. The Illuminati story, as discussed in the opening sections of this essay, is comforting because it assigns responsibility. If a group of specific people made specific choices to hide specific things, then those specific choices can theoretically be reversed by different choices from different people. The cover-up in Pinewood Derby cannot be reversed by replacing the people who made it, because the people who made it are every government on Earth, and they all made the same choice independently. Replacing them with different leaders would produce the same result if those different leaders were presented with the same situation, because the situation itself is what drives the behavior. The world's leaders in the episode are not portrayed as unusually evil. They are not scheming masterminds. The Prime Minister of Australia is there. The leaders of major and minor nations are all present when Randy presents the cash. None of them pause to consider the moral dimension of the choice. They just keep the money. Not because they are Illuminati, because they are people in a room with a lot of money and an easy lie available. Randy himself is the episode's most complete portrait of this principle in action. He is not a bad person across the run of the show. He is flawed, often ridiculous, capable of enormous selfishness, and also genuine love for his family. He steals the magnet not for world domination or financial gain in any traditional sense. He steals it so his son can win a race. He maintains the cover-up not because he has a plan. He maintains it because admitting he cheated would mean Stan losing a trophy and Randy looking bad in front of his neighbors. The nuclear strike on Finland is the moment the episode's argument becomes undeniable. That specific escalation, from covering up alien cash to destroying an entire country to prevent the truth from surfacing, is played completely straight. The decision is made quickly, without extended debate, by people who have already committed to the logic of the cover-up and are simply following that logic to its next required step. Finland was going to tell the truth. The truth would end the cover-up. Ending the cover-up would mean losing the money and facing consequences. The money was worth more to everyone than Finland was. The calculation is horrible, and it takes about 30 seconds. Stan's attempts to stop this throughout the episode place him in the same position that Kyle occupies in. Mystery of the urinal deuce that Mysterion occupies in the Coon trilogy, and that Al Gore occupies in the Man-Bear-Pig arc. He is the person who can see clearly what is happening and who keeps saying so, and he is overridden every time because the people around him have something they want more than they want to hear what he is saying. The episode aired in April 2009, less than a year after the global financial crisis had revealed the extent to which financial institutions around the world had been making similar calculations simultaneously, without coordination, simply because the incentive structure made those calculations obvious. Nobody ran the global financial collapse from a secret room. Thousands of people in thousands of institutions made choices that individually seemed reasonable given the incentives they were operating under, and the collective result of all those individual reasonable choices was catastrophic. Pinewood Derby was not written as a direct allegory for the financial crisis. It aired too close to the crisis for that to be possible given the show's production timeline, but the shape of its argument fits the shape of what happened in 2008 with an accuracy that makes the parallel difficult to ignore. The seal at the end of the episode remains in place through the rest of the series. Earth is technically still inside that force field in the show's internal continuity, isolated from the rest of the universe as punishment for the collective moral failure of its governments. The show never resolves this. It does not come back to it. The force field is there, Earth is contained, and the series continues as normal because South Park's version of Earth is already a strange enough place that a permanent intergalactic quarantine does not change daily life in any visible way. The argument embedded in that structural choice is worth sitting with. The show decided that the natural consequence of how human institutions behave when tested was permanent isolation from anything larger than themselves. And then it decided that this consequence would not look meaningfully different from how things were before because the isolation was already there. The force field just made it official. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes next takes this argument about collective behavior and refocuses it from the governments of the world down to the level of the human imagination itself, where the same pattern plays out again. inside the place where every story, every fear, every monster, and every hidden power has always actually lived. Section 9. The government built a door to your imagination. Imagination Land Trilogy, Season 11, Episodes 10, 11, and 12. There is a place where every story ever told still exists. Every character ever written down or drawn or dreamed up lives there. Every monster that ever frightened a child, every hero that ever made someone feel brave, every villain that ever made someone feel the particular cold that comes from a truly convincing threat. They all exist in the same space, moving around, living their lives, completely real within the logic of that world. The place is called Imagination Land. The United States government has had a portal to it since the Cold War. The Imagination Land trilogy aired across 3 consecutive weeks in October and November of 2007. The first episode, simply titled Imagination Land, aired on October 17th. The second, Imagination Land Episode 2, aired on October 24th. The third, Imagination Land Episode 3, aired on October 31st. The trilogy won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program for programming 1 hour or more in 2008. It was later released as an uncut film by Paramount with additional footage that had not aired on television. The setup begins with a bet. Cartman bets Kyle that leprechauns are real. Kyle, confident in his position, agrees to a wager with consequences too unpleasant to describe in detail here. The boys go into the woods looking for a leprechaun to settle the argument. They find one. Before Kyle can process what this means for the bet, a strange man arrives on a flying balloon and tells the group that the leprechaun was supposed to warn Imagination Land of an incoming attack and has failed to deliver that warning. He takes several of the boys on a ride to Imagination Land to deliver the warning themselves. Imagination Land is presented in the episode as an actual place, a dimension accessible through specific means. Its mayor is a figure who oversees the balance between the good side and the evil side of human imagination. The good side contains characters like Aslan from the Narnia books, Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, Luke Skywalker, Santa Claus in his benevolent form, the Lollipop King, and countless others. The evil side is separated from the good side by a barrier. On the evil side live characters like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, the woodland critters from a previous South Park episode, and every other creation of human imagination that was built to frighten or harm. The two sides have always been kept apart. Before the boys can deliver their warning, Islamic terrorists detonate a bomb inside Imagination Land. The attack kills many of the realm's inhabitants. The barrier separating the good side from the evil side is damaged. The terrorists use a captured character named Rockety Rocket to break the barrier completely. The evil side floods into the good side. The armies of every dark imaginary creation humans have ever produced begin overrunning the realm. Most of the boys escape on the back of a dragon. Butters is left behind. Back in the real world, the government's response begins immediately. This is where the episode introduces the element that carries the most weight for this essay's argument about hidden power. At the Pentagon, a general named General Dector calls a briefing. He informs his assembled staff that the attack on Imagination Land has occurred and that they need to act. His staff begin discussing options. During this briefing, one of the advisors makes a mistake. He mentions the Chinese portal to Imagination Land. He is about to explain further when his superior cuts him off sharply. The advisor, not picking up on the cue, continues and explains that yes, the United States has its own portal, and that it was built and used against the Russians during the Cold War. The portal is called Project Imagination Doorway. Stan and Kyle, brought to the Pentagon because they were present when the attack occurred and may have information the government needs, are shown the portal directly. It is a large, active gateway to the imagination. Scientists work around it. It has been operational for decades. The government has been accessing the realm of human imagination as a military and intelligence asset since at least the period of the Cold War, and this information is classified. The detail about the Cold War use is confirmed in Imagination Land Episode 2, when Stan and Kyle are held at the Pentagon and questioned about how they access the realm. They explain they simply went on a balloon with the mayor of Imagination Land. A scientist responds that this was probably through the Chinese portal, which prompts the accidental confirmation from the advisor that the United States has their own. The show is specific about this. The portal is not new. The military application of access to human imagination is not a recent development. This has been going on since the Cold War. The government's proposed solution to the crisis is a nuclear strike. General Dector announces to his staff and then to the public that the plan is to use a nuclear weapon inside Imagination Land to destroy the evil forces that have overrun the good side. The legal question of whether the federal government has the authority to bomb the collective human imagination then becomes a public debate. Legal commentators on fictional news programs within the episode discuss the constitutional dimensions. The court case that emerges from Cartman's original bet with Kyle, Cartman versus Broflovsky, which ruled that imaginary beings are real, becomes central to the government's legal ability to proceed with the bombing. The Supreme Court eventually overturns that ruling. Imaginary beings are declared to not actually be real, which clears the government to proceed with the nuclear strike. The bomb is launched. It detonates inside Imagination Land. Everything is destroyed. Butters, who has been inside Imagination Land since the first episode, survives the explosion. He stands in the white emptiness left behind after the bomb and does something that the episode presents as the most genuinely powerful act in the entire trilogy. He imagines Imagination Land back into existence. He rebuilds it from nothing using only his own imagination. Every character, every location, every detail returns because Butters decides it should. The realm is restored. Kyle, during the climax of the third episode, makes the argument to the government that allows the bombing to be questioned before it goes forward. He argues that imaginary beings are just as real people because of what they do to people's lives. The impact of an imaginary character on someone's thinking, their feelings, their values, their sense of what is possible is measurable and genuine. Aslan taught generations of children something real about courage and sacrifice. Freddy Krueger produced real fear in real people. The characters are imaginary, but the effect they have is not. Kyle argues that this makes them real in every way that matters. The government accepts this argument, decides the beings are real after all, and then uses that decision to justify the bombing anyway, because the legal framework around the strike requires the beings to be real for it to constitute a meaningful military action. Kyle's argument is used to achieve the exact opposite of what he intended it to achieve. The show does not comment on this directly. It just lets it happen, because this is how institutional logic works. A valid moral argument enters a system, and the system finds a way to use it for the purpose the system was already pursuing. The Imagination Land trilogy engages with the Illuminati question from a direction none of the other episodes in this essay approach. The question in most conspiracy thinking is what the hidden power controls. Money, governments, media, information. These are the standard categories. Imagination Land asks what happens if the hidden power controls something more fundamental than any of those? What if it controls the space where stories live? Human beings organize their understanding of the world through stories. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is a practical, observable reality. A child who grows up with certain stories about heroism understands heroism in the shape of those stories. A generation that grew up with certain stories about villainy recognizes villainy through the lens of those stories. The characters in Imagination Land are not merely entertainment. They are the accumulated library of how human beings have taught themselves to understand good and evil, bravery and cowardice, love and betrayal. They carry meaning that has been deposited in them by every person who has ever engaged with them. The government having a portal to this space is a more complete form of hidden power than anything else this essay covers. The NSA in Section 4 monitors what people do. Access to Imagination Land would allow interference with what people imagine, which shapes what they feel, which shapes what they do. The Cold War context the episode provides is precise. The use of psychological pressure and narrative influence against enemies was a documented feature of Cold War strategy from both sides. The show is not being fanciful when it places the portal's origins in that period. It is placing the tool inside the historical moment when that category of tool was being actively developed and deployed. The terrorist attack that opens the trilogy mirrors real-world events with enough precision that the mirror is clearly intentional. A coordinated attack by a small group causes catastrophic damage to a place that many people considered safe. The government responds with overwhelming force. The proposed solution is a weapon so large that it will destroy the target completely along with everything inside it, including the good things and the innocent things. The legal debate about whether the government has the authority to proceed runs alongside the military planning, slightly behind it, never quite catching up. The bomb launches before the debate is resolved. The woodland critters are a specific detail worth examining. They appear in the evil side of Imagination Land as one of the darker forces that pours into the good side after the barrier falls. The woodland critters originated in a season 8 episode of South Park called Woodland Critter Christmas, in which Cartman told a story about a group of woodland animals who turned out to be satanic cultists. The creatures from that episode now live permanently in the evil side of Imagination Land because someone imagined them. Cartman imagined them. His personal creation of a story about satanic animals produced actual entities that now exist in the collective space of human imagination. The show uses this to make a point that connects directly to everything this essay has been building toward. The things that get put into Imagination Land, the dark things, the frightening things, the evil things, do not disappear when the story ends. They live there. They accumulate. Every story ever told about hidden power, every narrative about shadow organizations and secret control, every villain ever convincingly written, exists somewhere in the same space as every hero and every hope. The realm contains all of it because human imagination produced all of it, and nothing that human imagination produces ever fully goes away. The government trying to destroy the evil side with a nuclear weapon is the most direct possible statement of a desire to eliminate dark imagination through force. The bomb does not discriminate. It destroys the evil characters and the good characters and the realm itself, leaving only white emptiness. The solution to the darkness in human imagination in the government's approach is to remove human imagination entirely. Butters rebuilding it from scratch is the episode's answer to that approach. The imagination comes back because it cannot be permanently destroyed. Butters simply wills it back. The nuclear option erases everything and produces nothing lasting. A single child with genuine imaginative commitment restores what the bomb took in moments. The production notes and commentary around the trilogy confirm that Parker and Stone built the story around a specific interest in what the imagination actually is and what it means to treat it as a military asset. The Emmy the trilogy won was for the complete three-part structure, which was evaluated as a single work. The Emmy citation specifically noted the ambition of the storytelling across all three episodes. The Cartman and Kyle bet running alongside all of this throughout the trilogy is important to the full picture. While the government is conducting military operations inside the human imagination, while terrorists are attacking a realm containing every story humanity has ever told, while Butters is surviving alone in a dimension full of evil fictional characters, Cartman's primary concern is getting Kyle to fulfill the terms of their original bet. He does not care about the crisis in Imagination Land except as it affects his ability to collect from Kyle. He pursues this goal through every episode with complete focus, treating it as equally or more important than the existential threat the trilogy is describing. This is the same argument the Coon and Friends trilogy makes through the Coon character, placed inside a different kind of story. Enormous power and enormous stakes exist. The person most actively engaged with trying to direct the situation is driven entirely by personal grievance rather than any larger concern. The imagination of humanity is under attack and potentially about to be permanently destroyed by a government nuclear strike. Cartman wants Kyle to pay up on a bet. The government portal to Imagination Land represents something the other episodes in this essay do not quite capture. Most hidden power operates on people from outside. It monitors them, recruits them, deceives them, controls the resources around them. The portal to the imagination is something different. It is access to the inside, to the place where meaning is made before it becomes behavior. Every other form of hidden power in this essay shapes what people do. Access to Imagination Land shapes what people are capable of believing is possible, which shapes everything that comes after. And the show tells you this in a cartoon about a bet between two fourth graders, with a magic barrier and a lollipop king and a woodland critter who explains military strategy to Jason Voorhees. The container is as absurd as it always is. The argument inside it is as serious as anything South Park has produced. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The last piece of this essay sits in the place the show has always returned to when it is done examining governments and cults and ancient gods and surveillance programs. The place where the most ordinary version of the hidden power story lives. The basement, the free beer, the people who walked in without knowing what they were walking into, and the person who spent his whole life paying for a choice he never made. Section 10. The world really is full of shit. Burgers, Season 15, Episode 8. Stan Marsh turns 10 years old, and everything starts tasting like feces. This is not a metaphor at first. The previous episode, You're Getting Old, which aired as the Season 15 mid-season finale on June 8, 2011, established that Stan has crossed some kind of threshold. Every song sounds terrible to him. Every movie looks cheap and stupid. Every piece of food tastes like literal excrement. The world has not changed. Stan has changed. He is seeing and tasting and hearing things as they actually are, rather than as the pleasant version that everyone around him experiences. His parents take him to doctors. Nobody can explain it. His parents separate during the episode. The season ends with Stan alone in his room, everything gray and bad tasting. Fleetwood Mac's Landslide playing over a montage of his life falling apart. Parker and Stone wrote that ending without knowing how they were going to resolve it. They confirmed this publicly. They went into the summer break with a mid-season finale that had dissolved Stan's friendships, his parents' marriage, and his ability to enjoy anything, and they had no plan for what came came next. The question they returned to in the writer's room in the fall was how to get the show back to normal without pretending the previous episode had not said what it said. Asperger's, Season 15, Episode 8, aired on October 5th, 2011. The title comes from Cartman mishearing the name of a real developmental condition called Asperger's syndrome when Kyle mentions it in school. Cartman hears the name, believes it refers to something involving hamburgers and a person's rear end, and decides immediately to fake having it by stuffing burgers into his underwear before cooking them. The resulting food is, according to every child who eats it, the best hamburger they have ever tasted. Cartman's burger stand becomes successful. This is the episode's comic track. The serious track belongs entirely to Stan. Stan's ongoing inability to experience the world as anything other than garbage gets him called to the school counselor. His guidance counselor decides that his cynicism and low mood must be the result of a vaccination he received the previous year, which the school believes has given him Asperger's syndrome. This is the episode's specific jab at the anti-vaccination movement that was active and visible in American culture at the time. The belief held by a segment of the population that vaccines cause developmental conditions in children. The show presents this belief as the wrong explanation for Stan's actual problem, which is not medical but perceptual. Stan sees the world clearly. That is his condition. He is taken to an Asperger's research center. A doctor meets with his mother Sharon and presents himself as a medical professional running group therapy sessions for people with the condition. When Sharon leaves the room, the doctor drops the act entirely. He tells Stan that none of the people in the room actually have Asperger's syndrome. The condition, as far as this group is concerned, does not exist. What does exist is the thing Stan is experiencing, a clear and unfiltered perception of a world that has genuinely deteriorated, and the people in this room are the ones who see it too. The group is called the Secret Society of Cynics. Every member of the group is dressed in the visual language of a specific film. The leader is dressed as Morpheus from The Matrix. Other members correspond to Trinity and other characters from the same trilogy. They wear dark clothing, have dramatic hairstyles, and wear dark sunglasses inside a medical facility. The South Park production confirmed that every member of the group has a direct counterpart in the Matrix films. The Matrix parallel is not decorative. The Matrix, released in 1999, is built around the premise that the world most people experience is a constructed illusion maintained by a controlling power, and that a small group of people who have been unplugged from the illusion can see what the world actually is. The red pill and blue pill choice from that film became one of the most widely used metaphors in conspiracy culture across the following 2 decades. Taking the red pill came to mean accepting an uncomfortable truth about hidden power over a comfortable lie. The Secret Society of Cynics in Asperger's is a direct parody of this mythology, complete with costumes and the leader speaking in the slow, deliberate cadence of someone who believes they are delivering profound revelations. The leader explains to Stan that the world really has turned into something terrible. This is not a feeling Stan is having. The world is objectively worse than it used to be, and most people cannot perceive this because they are being prevented from perceiving it. He does not know who is responsible. The group has theories. It might be aliens. It might be robots from the future. It might be genetically modified humans. The leader shrugs and says it could be whatever, and uses a dismissive phrase to signal that the specific identity of the controlling force is less important than the fact that a controlling force exists and is keeping people happy and blind. The group's solution to being able to see through the illusion is Jameson Irish whiskey. The leader hands Stan a glass of whiskey and explains that this is the serum. Drinking it allows a person to interact with the illusion world as if they cannot see through it, which makes daily life manageable. Without the serum, someone with Stan's condition would be unable to function among people who are experiencing the pleasant, false version of reality. With it, they can move through the world, talk to people, appear normal, while internally still knowing what they know. Stan takes the drink. Things look normal again. He can talk to his friends. He can eat food. The show is presenting alcohol as the mechanism by which a person who sees things clearly learns to get through a day surrounded by people who do not. And the show is doing this with complete awareness of what it is describing. The Secret Society of Cynics then recruits Stan for a mission. They have identified that certain corporate forces are actively working against Stan's operation, by which they mean Cartman's Burger Stand, which is unconnected to the society, but which the society has decided is somehow relevant to their cause. They send Stan, armed and drunk, to surveil a secret meeting being held by representatives of the major fast food chains in America. This is the moment the episode's structure completes its argument. The Secret Society of Cynics, dressed as Matrix characters, certain of a hidden controlling power behind the deterioration of the world, with just enough partial information to feel righteous about their mission, has identified the shadowy council they are fighting against. The shadowy council turns out to be a group of fast food executives in a conference room who are upset about Cartman's Burger taking taking their customers. They are not running the world. They are not preventing people from perceiving reality. They are middle management protecting quarterly earnings. The council leader opens the meeting by announcing there is a rebellion in their midst that must be dealt with. This sounds exactly like the language the society has been using about hidden power. The executives are using the same rhetorical register as the people who believe they are fighting against them, applied to a completely mundane business problem. The episode does not call attention to this parallel. It just places the two groups side by side and lets the structure speak. Stan is discovered by the executives. They tie him to a chair and interrogate him, believing he is a spy sent by Cartman's Burger to gather competitive intelligence. Kyle, happening to pass by, speaks to Stan through the window and in the process reveals that only Cartman knows the secret ingredient in his burgers. The executives storm Cartman's stand to discover it. The society members, drunk and committed to their mission, arrive at the same location and a gunfight breaks out. Most of the society members are killed. The conflict is resolved. The fast food executives retreat. Randy arrives at this point to tell Stan that he and Sharon have worked things out and are moving back in together. Stan, who has spent the entire episode building toward a genuine understanding of his condition and a decision about what to do about it, receives this information as the final piece of a resolution he did not ask for. His parents getting back together means the reset is complete. His friendships return. Wendy is his girlfriend again. Cartman's Burger is exposed and shut down. Everything goes back to how it was before You're Getting Old and before Asperger's changed anything. The closing shot is Stan walking out of his house to join his friends for a normal day. Before he steps off the porch, he reaches back and takes a drink of whiskey from a bottle he has hidden just inside the door. This image is the most honest and the most serious thing the episode produces. The reset happened. Everything is normal again. Stan's parents are together, his friends are back, the world looks the way it is supposed to look, and Stan needs a drink before he can face it. The mechanism the secret society of cynics gave him, the way of moving through a world that looks wrong without letting that wrongness stop you from functioning, is still running. He did not leave it behind when things went back to normal. He took it with him. He is going to need it every day going forward. Parker and Stone described their thinking around the 2-episode arc in interviews. They said they considered different ways to resolve it, but decided the show needed to reset to normal. They described the pressure of returning to standard South Park format after ending a season on something that genuinely could not be easily continued. The whiskey detail at the end was their acknowledgement of the cost of that reset. The show had to go back to how it was. The person inside the show who had seen things clearly had to find a way to keep seeing them while still participating in the version of the world everyone else was living in. The Secret Society of Cynics is South Park's most direct self-portrait dressed as a conspiracy. The group believes the world is genuinely terrible and that most people cannot perceive this. They are correct. The world in the show, at the point this episode airs, has produced everything documented across the previous 10 sections of this essay. A cult connected to an ancient god that nobody knows about. A surveillance program powered by an imprisoned magical figure. A government portal to the human imagination built during the Cold War. A global cover-up of alien contact conducted simultaneously by every nation on Earth. The show's world really is full of hidden things. The society is not wrong that something is going on. The whiskey is the part that places them inside the conspiracy tradition rather than above it. Their response to seeing clearly is not to expose what they see to others. Their response is to develop a chemical means of functioning within the system they believe is manipulated, which means continuing to operate within the system, which means the system continues. The people who see through the illusion and then develop a way to interact with the illusion anyway are not outside the system. They are the most effectively contained people in it. They have accepted the terms they believe were imposed on them. Every conspiracy community throughout history has contained a version of this dynamic. The group that knows the truth but cannot reach anyone with it, that develops its own rituals and its own language for managing the gap between what it believes and what everyone around it believes, and that fills that gap with something that makes daily life bearable. The Secret Society of Cynics fills it with Jameson. Other groups fill it with other things. The mechanism is the same. Stan's whiskey on the porch is the last image the episode wants the audience to carry. The show is going to reset. Things are going to go back to normal. The knowledge of what lies beneath the normal, the cults and the surveillance and the portals and the cover-ups and the deals with demons, does not go away when the surface returns to its familiar shape. Someone has to keep functioning inside it. Someone has to walk out of the house and join their friends and pretend the world is fine. And they will need something to make that possible. What all 10 episodes in this essay, taken together, have been building toward is a position that South Park has been holding since the first black CIA helicopters appeared in its very first episode. Not every conspiracy is real, but enough of them are real enough that the people who dismiss all of them entirely are making the same mistake as the people who believe all of them them completely. The truth, as always in this show, lives in the specific, in the details, in the exact episode, the exact scene, the exact character, the exact consequence. The final section pulls all of it together and names what South Park has actually been saying about hidden power across all these years, all these episodes, and all these very specific and very carefully chosen moments of a cartoon about 4 kids from Colorado who have been navigating a world full of things nobody admits are there. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.